There's great anticipation as the Conclave is set to elect a new pope in the Vatican today. In fact, the process begins today. Some cardinals will remain at the Sistine Chapel until a new pope has been elected. The new pontiff will, of course, replace Pope Francis, who passed away some time ago due to a stroke and heart failure. Now, more than 100 cardinals, we're told, all under the age of 80, and some from across the world will be part of this conclave and decide who should be next to lead the 1.4 billion strong member church. To get an understanding of this process, at least to the best of his understanding, let's bring in Father Lawrence Ndlovu, who's with us in studio, as the world really, Father, watches once again the Catholic Church do what the Catholic Church does. And this is a not orchestrated, but choreographed process steeped in centuries of the Church's history, and those who are part of the Catholic Church very much believe that it's a process guided by the Holy Spirit.
Well, it must be. For it to be able to survive over and over after so many centuries, there certainly has to be something divine at work there. What has been, suppose, one of the strengths of the Church is that because the Church has been around for so long, having to do these things and to put up policies, guidelines as to how these things must take place has been most helpful. So there is no argument about, I think this should happen this time or anything like that. It's all written down. We know what happens after what happens. If a pope dies, this is what will take place. And what does it take for a conclave to sit, and what are the preparations therefore? So there is, I suppose, benefit in age, I would say, and it is wonderful to see when systems work out.
Yeah, and I suppose, this system has survived the test of time, as you've put it. I mean, so many different eras have come and gone, but we're told you can draw a clear line from where we are today to when all of this started. Despite that, though, a lot of it is still so much shrouded in mysticism and mystery and secrecy. And I wonder if you can let us in on what the thinking behind that is, because the Church clearly takes that seriously enough that if a cardinal, for example, we're told, or any of the assistants are said to be leaking information, they face the risk of being excommunicated from the Church.
And that is not just exclusive, by the way, to just conclaves. Whether it be the seal of confession, just down in a show, if a person comes to you for confession, you can't say a word. So there is, of course, an expectation from the ordinary priest, wherever he is in the world, that you should be able to hold some things, a sub pactore in your heart. That is expected of you. But also, you must safeguard the bark of St. Peter. You will have heard the many different conversations of people saying, should we move left, should we move right, and that kind of thing. The person that must emerge out of that shouldn't in any way seem to be representing anybody really, but all people who are in the life of the Church. He could be easily dragged into that by whatever was discussed in the many general councils that the cardinals had leading up to the conclave, and they would say, oh, but so-and-so said, and therefore he was saying this, and he was positioning himself for that, and that kind of thing. There is much more in the hearts of popes that we will probably never know. These are people who meet heads of states weekly, almost, who are in communication and making very difficult decisions and very important decisions for nations, and facilitating and mediating and so on. Can you imagine if you had somebody who could not keep a secret for that job?
I never imagined a pope to be a person who can keep a good secret, but you make a valid point. We'll speak a bit more about the very human involvement in this process, right? Because as much as, there's a belief that it's guided by the Holy Spirit, those are still 135 men who have to make that call. But if you can just hold on to that thought, Father Lawrence, and let's take our viewers to the Vatican in just a moment. In fact, that's where those cardinals will be meeting. In fact, I'm told we'll touch base with our correspondent in just a moment. And in fact, he might very well be ready now. And watching those developments for us from the Vatican is our correspondent, Trent Murray, who joins us now live. And Trent, if those walls could speak in the Vatican, I think they'd tell a very interesting story about what's happened over the centuries and what we're likely to see over the next day, weeks, possibly even months.
I think you're spot on, and I think we are truly about a moment in history that does not happen too often. The last time the papal conclave met was, of course, back in 2013 when they elected Francis, but it is a very different conclave, the one that's meeting in 2020. Some 7 will be in the Sistine Chapel during that voting period. The last time they met, it was just 48. That is a real legacy, I think, of Pope Francis, trying to spread the influence of the church to places like Africa and Asia, and to take away some of the power of Rome and the centralisation. We know 18 cardinals are from the African continent that will take part in the 133 total to choose a new leader for the world's 1.4 billion Catholics.
Yeah, and we've watched literally as the world has walked through some of those pathways in the Vatican. I'm sure there's great anticipation even from where you're standing now. Any kind of murmurs on what the expectation is from those who have a physical proximity to the process that's likely to unfold?
Well, look, I can tell you this. If you ask someone down there in St. Peter's Square their opinion, they'll certainly give it to you. There's thousands of the faithful down there right now wanting to get a front row seat to what's about to happen. And of course, there's just differing views within the Catholic faithful over the direction of travel they want with a new leader. Do they want a more conservative pope that will sort of go back to traditional leadership of the church, or do they want to sort of continue the legacy of Pope Francis with someone who is more progressive and speaking out on issues like climate change and fighting poverty and some of those political issues that really put Pope Francis in the headlines often? I mean, I think that will be really at the heart of the debate that takes place in the Sistine Chapel when they vote. There will be a power play happening, a bit of a battle for influence, and that's why we could be here for several days waiting for them to hit that 2/3 majority that they need in order to select a new pontiff.
Yeah, there's an aspect to this that is a spectacle, which I think for many people comes down to the smoke that we're hoping will be billowing there close to the Sistine Chapel itself. It's worth taking us through what that means and what the anticipation or the expectation at the very least is.
Yeah, it's a very interesting way to share the news with the world. It goes back centuries, but effectively there are two colours of smoke that we are looking out for. If there is black smoke that rises from that chimney, it means that they have not been able to select a pope during a particular voting session, and they will take a little break, go back to the drawing board and do it all again. But if there is white smoke, well, that will be the signal to the world that they have finally chosen one. We know today there is just one round of voting taking place. It's quite unlikely, we imagine, that they will select one in the first round. It hasn't happened in hundreds of years. If they don't select one today, then we will wait 24 hours more or less, and then they will have 4 votes tomorrow and another 4 votes on Friday if they need it. They can then take a break for the weekend and come back on Monday. But that's sort of the timeline that we're looking at. But white smoke, that is the symbol we are all watching for to get word on whether they've made a decision.
Absolutely, and we'll be keeping our phones fully charged, waiting for any update from you and the rest of the team. But for now, Trent Murray, live to us there from Rome in the Vatican. For now, thanks very much indeed. Right, let's continue with our discussion closer to home with Father Lawrence Ndlovu, who's with us, helping us, I suppose, tear into some of the nuances around what's taking place there, Father. And before we went to Rome, I had spoken about how, yes, this is a process that people believe has divine intervention, but you have 135 odd men who are there. And whilst we don't want to anthropologize about how racialized they are, how they come from particular context, those are things that I'm sure are in the minds of, let's call it the intellectuals of the church, who without a doubt are keeping a close eye on even some of the commentary, for example, that's been made. I saw yesterday 2 cardinals being interviewed by the media as they were walking through the streets of the Vatican, something that you've never seen before.
Yes, and I think every conclave that happens as we move, into these sort of contemporary times is taking a different character, because we didn't really have the kind of whether social media storms and all of these kinds of things that we've had in the past. But what we've come to see now is that the cardinals are becoming more and more accessible. We know their opinions right through, in and out of conclave, because of social media, because of statements they write, because of the many matters and issues that they participate in. They are passionate about it. And so we're able to formulate what kind of persons they are and what interests them. And that's been very interesting to see and interesting to watch, because although the cardinals in this particular conclave don't know each other, most of them, which is a very rare thing about this conclave, is that Pope Francis appointed cardinals from around the world. The majority of them have never really sat for more than an hour with each other. If they have sat with each other, they were attending a liturgy in Rome or something like that. So
which means they shouldn't be talking, really.
Yes, they wouldn't really be speaking. You would be surprised. A lot of people think we sort of hold hands all the time and sort of, we just get on with what you're tasked to do, And now they've been spending a week or so or two just listening to each other, meeting each other, and so on. And that's been very interesting to see and interesting to watch. And I think that might influence what comes out of this conclave. And you're right. All of the human issues and all of the matters that pertain to the world will be issues that are pressing the cardinals very closely. Is it a cardinal from Africa, the fastest growing place where the faith is, or Asia, or the Great South, and so on? And what are the issues that must be front and center? Issues of the environment, issues of inclusion, of social justice, of equality, of justice and peace. But all of those are still part of very much of what Pope Francis has been talking about, the main tenet of the faith. These are not separate from one's faith experience. If you fail at these things, at justice and peace, at all of these things, you're failing in your Christian duty as well. So it's a new direction, I think, and these matters are no longer just peripheral matters after we close the Bible, as it were, very much part of the faith expression. I think that's where the cardinals are looking and listening and seeing who best can take this new, not so new, but this new reality of the church as one that is very much alive, both internally to its own issues, but also the issues of the world.
Yeah, speaking about this new reality, and I'm sure you've heard all manner of commentary of the past couple of weeks. I mean, even people quoting the different productions that have been put together about this process that we're about to see unfold. But one of the lines from that world of commentary has really stuck with me, and that's around this idea that exists that God appoints a pope to correct their predecessor in a way. And I don't know if that's even tradition of the church or something that's actually that's believed by the faithful. But I do think it's an interesting concept, whether that's true, especially when you look at the past three popes. John Paul II, some people say, was a whole lot more charismatic, followed by a Benedict XVI, who was said to be a whole lot more of an academic, more closer to the doctrine, followed by a Francis, who believed that the church should be among the people, speaking about, a shepherd smelling like the sheep, so to speak. Do you reckon there's any credence to that way of thinking at the very least?
I think the error that people make is they think of a multiplicity of papacies. There is one papacy. The Bark of St. Peter is one. Now, who occupies that seat, of course, will change in the persons that occupy it. I do think that there is some truth, not so much that God appoints this person to correct the predecessor per se, but to also introduce yet another face of the church that mightn't be seen yet or sometimes forgotten. All of it is always linear because the center in the Catholic Church will hold, because the doctrine will never change. The central tenet.
For better or for worse.
For better or worse. You don't wake up and decide that Jesus Christ is not divine. You'll be gone, if you know what I mean.
Great.
So no matter which pope you choose, there are the central tenets of the church which are you can't compromise on those. There's no discussion about that. But it is about where then is the church in the modern world? Where, and does it respond to where the people of God are in 2025 and beyond? And what is the language for that? Every single person right now in the world, no matter what they choose to identify as, they want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be recognized. Whether or not their views are true or not, they must be heard. And the church, too, is their home equally. Whether you're a cardinal or the person who's just sitting in the pew, the church, by virtue of their baptism, holds everybody as being equal. Now, as time progresses, new issues emerge. I can imagine John the 23rd writing after the Second World War and all of those issues. You see, encyclical letters like Pacem in Terris and all of those sorts of things. Those were pressing issues at the time. But if you read Pacem in Terris, Peace on Earth, it's a document very much alive for the world now in war. So although it is linear, but it is enriching. It is each papacy, each pope, enriching the bark of St. Peter, which is the singular bark of the Apostle Peter.
Fascinating as always. 135 odd of those cardinals will be stepping into the Sistine Chapel to vote for a pope. I wonder how many of them think they will be the pope, but I suppose time will tell. Father Lawrence, we'll have to leave it there for now. Hope we have you back as we make sense of the next chapter of this particular institution. Father Lawrence helping us think through the College of Cardinals, the process that's likely to unfold over the next couple of hours, days, weeks, months, who knows? And of course, what the implications are for many of the faithful around the world.